Continuing Pickman's model. There was something very disturbing about the nauseous sketches and half-finished monstrosities that leered from every side of the room. And when Pickman suddenly unveiled a huge canvas on the side away from the light, I could not for my life keep back a loud scream the second I had emitted that night. It echoed and echoed through the dim vaultings of the ancient and nitrous cellar, and had to choke back a flood of reaction that threatened to burst out as hysterical laughter. Merciful Creator, Eliot. But I did not know how much was real and how much was feverish fancy. It doesn't seem to me that Earth can hold a dream like that. It was a colossal and nameless blasphemy, with glaring red eyes, and it held in bony claws a thing that had been a man, gnawing at the head as a child nibbles at a stick of candy. Its position was a kind of crouch, and as one looked, one felt that at any moment it might drop its present prey and seek a juicier morsel. But damn it all, it wasn't even the fiendish subject that made it such a mortal fountainhead of all panic. That not Nar, the dog face, with its pointed ears, bloodshot eyes, flat nose, and drooling lips. It was the scaly claws, nar the mold-caked body, nar the half-hooved feet. None of these, through any one of them, might well have driven an excitable man to madness. Now, you could say that's swearing, you could say that's called out to God and in disgust and responded to the person. It was the technique. Eliot, the cursed, the impious, the unnatural technique. As I am a living being, I have never elsewhere saw the actual breath of life so fused into canvas. The monster was there. It glazed and gnawed and glared. And I knew that only a suspension of nature's laws could ever let a man paint a thing like that without a model, without some glimpse of another world, which no mortal, unsold to the fiend, has ever had. Pinned with the thumbtack to a vacant part of the canvas was a piece of paper, now badly curled up, probably. I thought that a photograph from which Pickman meant to paint a background as hideous as the nightmare it was to enhance. I reached out to uncurl and look at it, when suddenly I saw Pickman start as if shot. He had been listening with peculiar intensity ever since my shock scream had waked unaccustomed echoes in the dark cellar, and now he seemed struck with a fright which, though not comparable to my own, had in it more of the physical than of the spiritual. He drew a revolver and motioned me to silence, and then stepped out into the main cellar and closed the door behind him. I think I was paralyzed for an instant. Imitating Pickman's listening, I fancied I heard a faint skirring sound somewhere, and a series of squeals or bleats in a direction I couldn't determine. I thought of huge rats and shuddered. Then there came a subdued sort of clatter, which somehow set me all goose-flesh. A furtive, groping kind of clatter, though I cannot attempt to convey what I mean in words. It was like heavy wood falling on stone or brick. Wood on brick. What did that make me think of? It came again and louder. There was a vibration as if the wood had fallen further than it had fallen before. After that followed a sharp grating noise, a shouted gibberish from Pickman, and the deafening discharge of all 6 chambers of a revolver, fired spectacularly as a lion tamer might fire in the air for effect. A muffled squeal, or squawk, and a thud. Then more wood and brick grating, a pause at the opening of the door, at which, I'll confess, I started violently. Pickman reappeared with a smoking weapon, cursing the bloated rats that infested the ancient well. The deuce knows what they eat, Thurber, he grinned, for those archaic tunnels touched graveyard and witch den and sea coast. But whatever it is, they must have run short, for they were devilish anxious to get out. Your yelling stirred them up, I fancy. Better be cautious in these old places. Our rodent friends are the one drawback, though I sometimes think they're a positive asset by way of atmosphere and color. Well, Elliot, that was the end of the night's adventure. Pickman had promised to show me the place, and heaven knows he had done it. He led me out of that tangle of alleys, in another direction, it seems, for when we sighted a lamp-post, we were in a half-familiar street, with monotonous rows of mingled tenement blocks and old houses. Charter Street it turned out to be, but I was too flustered to notice just where we hit it. We were too late for the elevated, and walked back downtown through Hanover Street. I remember that walk. We switched from Tremont up Beacon, and Pickman left me at the corner of Joy, where I turned off. I never spoke to him again. Why did I drop him? Don't be impatient. Wait till I ring for coffee. We've had enough of the other stuff. But I, for one, need something. No, it wasn't the pantings that I saw in that place, though I'll swear that there were enough to get him ostracized in 10/10 of the homes and clubs of Boston. I guess you won't wonder now why I have to steer clear of subways and cellars. It was something I found in my coat the next morning. You know, the curled-up paper tacked to that frightful canvas in the cellar. The thing I thought was a photograph of some scene he meant to use as a background for that monster. The last scare had come while I was reaching to uncurl it, and it seems I vacantly crumpled it into my pocket. But here's the coffee. Take it black, Elliot, if you're wise. Now, coffee is sort of a tricker. The smell of coffee has a better effect on the energy than the coffee itself. People say that's psychosomatic, but this actually goes beyond that, because people who don't even use caffeine have the reaction. But caffeine has a negative effect on energy if taken internally. But again, it's not something people need. People just convince themselves that they need it to get into the habit and become addicted. Caffeine has a stronger physical addiction than marijuana, and it lasts longer. Marijuana can last for up to 3 days. But that's not really the point. Yes, that paper was the reason I dropped Pickman. Richard Upton Pickman, the greatest artist I'd ever known, the foulest being that ever leaped the bounds of life into the pits of myth and madness. Elliot, old Reed was right. He wasn't strictly human. Either he was born in a strange shadow, or he'd found a way to unlock the forbidden gate. It is all the same now, for he is gone. Back in the fabulous darkness he loved to haunt. Here, let's have the chandelier going. Don't ask me to explain or even conjecture about what I burned. Don't ask me either what lay behind that mole-like scrambling. Pickman was so keen to pass off as rats. There are secrets, you know, which might have come down from old Salem times. And Cotton Mather tells even stranger things. You know how damned lifelike Pickman's paintings were, how we all wondered where he got those faces. Well, that paper wasn't a photograph of any background after all. What it showed was simply the monstrous being he was painting on that awful canvas. It was the model he was using, and its background was merely the wall of the cellar studio, in minute detail. But by God, Elliot, it was a photograph from life. And the vistas, the horrifying vistas, something about them is that, yeah, people do make pacts with demons, as they might be called. Some it's not so deliberate. Some it's just stepping forward on the path of calling up demons. Whether you call it worship or not, it's worship. Whether you formally join the satanic path or not, that's still what's going on. But people, they have horrifying visions, and that's part of the point. Sometimes they start really long and hard to get those. It's not like, and they're only granted to the few in some cases. But that's not the only way to have knowledge of these things.